Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our study club, our monthly study club. And we are blessed to have one of the most amazing hygienists I know. She's so super smart and she's full of information. I want to introduce everybody to Amanda Hill. RDH, she has about 25 years experience, clinical, but she also has 5 years of experience in educating the dental industry. She's a recipient of the OSAP's Emerging Infection Control Leader Award, a member of the Celerant Executive Consulting Team, an active participant with advisory board for the RDH magazine, Dentistry IQ and OSAP's Infection Control and Practice Editorial Review Board and Membership Committee, which is a mouthful.
That's a lot. It's like 5 different things all in one sentence.
I mean, wow. I mean, do you have any time to, oh my God. She has been featured in a multitude of magazines, multitude of articles. Her primary focus as a Waterline Warrior is, and I have my tags. I have my Waterline Warrior little ribbon on my speaker
ribbons.
Stick.
Yeah.
So she is very well known for this. So I want to thank Amanda. I don't want everybody to welcome her. You're in for lots of great information to be able to know that you are doing the right thing for your patients and making sure that you're keeping your Waterline safe and patients and your staff safe. So I'm going to ask Amanda to take it off from here. And
All right.
Add, she's an amazing friend that I've known for several years.
Oh, thank you, Fran. I think Fran probably should give everyone introductions because she just makes you feel good. Fran, thank you so much for inviting me to give this webinar today. I was so honored when you sent me that Facebook message. I was like, of course I'll do this. This is awesome. And so thank you everyone for having me here today. I want to admit to you guys that when Fran asked me this, she also asked me to include ozone and Waterlines. And the only experience I had prior to this was really Barbara Tritz telling me about her ozone, and I helped her kind of through her Waterline journey. So I did do this like deep dive in the past month into ozone, but I'm counting on you guys to be the experts. So feel free to throw things in the chat. And if I say something that isn't quite right, or you have a different experience, I have the chat up so I can see it as I'm talking. And so I'd love for this to be super interactive, but I'd love to know kind of as we start what you are doing currently, if anything, to treat your Waterlines. So are you doing some sort of shock? Are you using ozone, or are you kind of new at this and you're still trying to figure it out? So feel free to put that in the chat. And that way I'll kind of know what paths to go down and maybe which slides to spend some more time on and which slides maybe we should go past a little quicker. So feel free to do that as we chat about crashing the biofilm party. So we're going to talk about understanding the path to safe dental unit Waterlines. So full disclosure, I am a consultant with ProEdge Dental Water Labs. So I do make a monthly honorarium from them. So I need to mention that just so you all know that, but I promise to be fair and balanced today. Fran pretty much gave my whole intro, so we'll slide past that one. So I want to tell you, so this Waterline journey for me began back in about 2019. And I was living in Germany and we moved back to the States actually in 2017. And I went to my annual infection control course review. You know, you're supposed to do that annually, at least in my state. And all of a sudden the speaker started talking about Waterlines. And I was like, Waterlines? We got to do what with our Waterlines? And the only thing I remembered was back in hygiene school, I specifically remembered my instructor telling me in the morning we had to run our lines because one time when she was running her Cavitron, a spider crawled out. So I thought we ran our lines in the morning before we saw patients because spiders could crawl out. I don't think biofilm existed back when I graduated from hygiene school, so we weren't even thinking about that then. I just knew we were supposed to do it. But now when we think about our Waterlines, we really want to make sure that water is safe. This is a picture of my daughter at her last hygiene visit. And I want to know that the water that's going into her mouth is safe water, right? And so this is certainly something that we are concerned about. And I will tell you that I am continuing to learn in this Waterline journey, like I just spent this deep dive into ozone, but Still, sometimes my office will fail a test. And so we are continuing to figure out different things to use to fight that biofilm, because biofilm's a beast. And I see Karen says that she's using ozone, and Corinne says she shocked her lines with bleach. Oh, she found a video on YouTube. Yes, there's a great video on YouTube. In fact, there's one by ProEdge, which I love. So there are all of these lines going in our operatory. Isn't this operatory beautiful? Look at how beautiful, like the lines are straight and clean and everything. And really, this is more of what our operatories look like, right? And these lines, they get tangled up in our operatory. You know, you pick up your air water syringe and your suction falls on the floor. Not only do these lines get tangled up in our operatories, but they get tangled up in our heads. So a lot of times when I speak on water, a lot of people then start asking something about suction. And these lines are really different. The water delivers the water, the suction takes away the water, and we're going to treat these completely differently. So if you ever want me to come back for a suction talk, we can talk suction later. But Fran mentioned that I am the Waterline Warrior. I have a cape and everything. My good friend, Dr. Emily Bogey, made it for me. So I like to lecture in my fancy cape. I feel like a superhero, like I'm slashing the biofilm. So here's our objectives for today. We're going to describe the importance of clean dental water lines. We're going to define the tests, or the steps that we need to pass the test. And then we're going to talk about some different products that we can use. Gemma is using centralized UV sterilization system. Interesting, Gemma. Okay, didn't do a deep dive on UV. The thing I know about UV is that sometimes it's great right where it is, but then 5 feet down the road, sometimes the biofilm can get hold. So I'm curious if that's working well for you, because it very well could be. Let's talk about why we are testing water. So we are testing water because there's biofilm growing in those lines, just like in our patients' periodontal pockets, right? We have biofilm in those lines. We're testing our water because we're concerned about our patients' health. We're testing our water because we're concerned about our health. We actually matter in this equation. I think so often we forget about ourselves and that we matter. And lastly, we're testing because the CDC, the FDA, OSHA, and entire alphabet of organizations say that we have to do it. So that's why we're doing it. So why is there biofilm in our lines? Like, I didn't put it there, you didn't put it there. So why does it grow there? Well, there is a high surface area to water flow rate ratio. And what that means is that tubing is so teeny, tiny. Like some of it's so small, like it's like a safety pin. You put it in there, like it's that tiny. And what that means is that water is allowed to touch all the sides of that tubing. And as that water is allowed to touch all the sides of that tubing, it's able to leave behind residue. When you think about the pipes that come into your house or into your office, those are really nice and wide, right? But then they just get smaller and smaller and smaller. And really, those are that perfect environment for that biofilm to grow. There's a great study out by Barbeau that showed that the bacteria in water lines can reach up to 200,000 colony forming units in less than 5 days in a brand new office. So you've just built your office. You're like, yes, we're good. We don't have to worry about water for like a year, right? No, 5 days, only 5 days. And that water can get up to 200,000 colony forming units, and safe water is at 500 colony forming units. So that's really way past that EPA standard. Dental unit water lines are way less like that nice flowy stream you see on the left, right? You see that stream, like I can hear the water rushing. I can hear the birds chirping, right? It's just, you can smell, it smells clean, right? Then you look at that picture on the right and like, you can smell it, right? It's swampy. There's like mosquitoes, like, you know, you're killing them on your face. Like you can just, it's like you can taste it in your mouth. And that's really way more how dental unit water acts because of that tiny little tubing. And so we know how the biofilm works, right? First it attaches, then it grows, and then it lets go. It's sort of like our arteries, right? And how we have cholesterol, and then it attaches, and then it breaks free, and then we have a clot, and then we have a heart attack or a stroke, right? Very similar kind of way of acting. So what's in our biofilm? There's actually, we could spend an entire hour saying names that I have a really hard time saying that have way too many consonants in them or way too many vowels in a row. But the 3 things that we're most concerned about, are the 3 things that have actually harmed patients, are Pseudomonas aeruginosa, non-tuberculous mycobacterium, and the Legionella species. So those are the ones that we're actually concerned about in our dental unit water because we know that they have actually hurt people. There's a woman in Italy back in 2012 that died from Legionnaire's disease that she got from contaminated dental unit water. They were able to trace it back to her dentist in Italy. We know of a case in Atlanta, just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, where 30 children were affected by contaminated water. And in Anaheim, California, 71 to 202, we'll talk about that in a second, children were affected by Mycobacterium abscessus outbreak in dental unit water. In Sweden, a man died of Legionella from the cup filler. That's where they found the Legionella, was in the cup filler. And then in Caracas, Venezuela, 3 patients had a severe infection. So this is interesting. The government in Caracas went into all of the dental offices in Caracas, and they tested all of the water in the city of Caracas. And what they found was that 56% of those water lines in Caracas had that up to 1,000 colony, over 1,000 colony forming units, and 73% of them had Pseudomonas in their samples. So 73% of the offices had Pseudomonas in their lines in Caracas. So hopefully Venezuela is working hard on their water lines. If anybody knows anyone in Venezuela, I'm happy to take a trip and lecture to them. I'd have to do it in English, but most recently, there was a CDC Health Advisory Network alert, which from what I understand, this is the first time that this has happened dentistry specific. And there is another outbreak of Mycobacterium that has happened in the dental operatorium. We know this was done in a pediatric practice. We don't know where, they haven't told us yet, but another cluster of children was harmed from contaminated dental unit water. So I'm sure that that's going to hit the news soon once public health is done investigating this. But the thing is this keeps happening. Like sometimes people say, well, the chances of it happening are pretty slim. No, it keeps happening. And we're getting better at tracing these things back. And so I think we're going to learn more and more about this. So we need to know how to take care of this. So I want to tell you a little bit about Mimi Morales, just to help you kind of remember the why. I think sometimes in dentistry, I know as a hygienist, like we get super busy and you're like, do I really have to flush my lines? Do I really need to deal with the water? Yeah, we really need to. And when you think about the need to, I want you to think of sweet little Mimi. Mimi was the first child that was brought into the hospital in the Anaheim outbreak. And what happened was Mimi went into her dentist office and she got a routine pulpotomy, a baby root canal, right? And she develops this serious infection. So Mimi's parents take her to a pediatrician. The pediatrician gives them some antibiotics. They go home. It's not getting better. Infection's getting worse. They go back to the pediatrician. The pediatrician gives them a different antibiotic. The infection gets worse. She's actually now has an abscess that is eating through her chin. So they take her to the ER. ER brings an infectious disease doctor. The infectious disease doctor, immediately they do surgery. They remove part of her jawbone. She's in the hospital for more than a month, gets really, really heavy antibiotics. So let's talk a little bit about that Anaheim timeline. So first, Mimi goes in. She's our patient number 1. And she spends more than a month in the hospital. Within 2 weeks, another child comes in. And by the grace of God, the grace of the universe, the same infectious disease doctor is on duty in the ER that day when the second child comes in. So this second child comes in, this doctor sees this child and she thinks, wow, this is a lot like that little girl I saw 2 weeks ago. And so this doctor is the doctor who connected the dots to the dental office. She figured out both of these kids had pulpotomies, and they both had similar infections. And so then public health went into action and actually went to every single child, every single home that had any care in this office. And in the end, they ended up with 71 children that were affected by, that fell into the line of what public health had said that they fit the criteria for the study. So they followed these children for over 3 years, every kid that had been to that dental office. And so they were exposing more and more children as time went on, and that practice was closed down. This, of course, hit the news cycle because, this is what it does, right? We always like to talk about bad stuff that happens. And there are continued lawsuits going. It's still ongoing. It hasn't been settled yet. So some of the numbers associated with this outbreak. So out of the 71 children that were affected, according to public health, 26 of them had to have more than one surgery. 45 of them lost between 1 and 6 permanent teeth. So we're not just talking baby teeth here. 29 of them were treated with the antibiotic that they used to treat leprosy. So I'm not just talking like a little Augmentin, little pink stuff, shaky shake. One of the side effects is hearing loss for this antibiotic. And so this is a big deal. Like, it's not just, have a little antibiotic and you'll be fine. I mentioned that at 71 kids, they were between the ages of 2 and 11, and 99% of them were hospitalized and required surgical debridement. But this is the big number that I want everyone to remember and kind of stick in your head. And if anybody ever tells you that water is not important, turn this little factoid back on them. The symptoms for these children showed up between 1 and 409 days after treatment. I mean, so let that soak in for like 2 seconds. 409 days after after this last child had their pulpotomy, then the infection emerged. So it had been brewing in their body for a while, and then whatever it was, allowed it to take hold. And so I think the reason why this number strikes me so much is that I've been a hygienist for over 25 years, and when I initially heard about water, I was like, well, I've never made anybody sick, so I must be doing okay. Truthfully, all that we can say is that I don't know if I've ever made anyone sick. And you know what? Because I know what to do now I know that I will never make anyone sick. So let's make sure that we are doing all we can to provide these little babies with a safe dental visit. So a little update on these cases. There are 202 lawsuits associated with the Anaheim outbreak. And their lawyer, actually, I met him last summer, Ed Zinman. He's a dentist and a lawyer. He's pretty awesome. He says that they will settle very soon, but they just haven't finished the final details on the settlement. The Atlanta case that I mentioned that happened a year before Anaheim, that one also still has not settled yet. Their water tested out at 91,333 colony forming units. And remember, I said 500 was what the EPA tells us. So there might be a trial sometime this year. I'm not sure. The point is this: our patients are listening. Our patients hear this. So let your patients know what you're doing to take care of them, because darn it all, when they're going to see this, next story break on 60 Minutes, I think 60 Minutes still exists, right? When they see this break, they're going to be like, oh, I know my office already does safe water. They've told me all about it. They test all the time. So it's really important that we make sure that our patients understand what's happening. So we know that we care about our patients. That's easy peasy, right? We're healthcare professionals. We love our patients. We do anything for our patients. But part of safe water is about our health. And I think COVID really opened our eyes to aerosols in a way that we never really noticed them before. And then I remember going back to work after COVID, and I felt like I was swimming through a sea of aerosols to get to my operatory, right? But I have amazing news. There's this awesome study that Meet Hill did in 2021 at The Ohio State University. And I love what they found in this study. So what they did was they did some aerosol generating procedures, and they captured the aerosols. And then they figured out what was in those aerosols. And what they found in this study was that 78% of what was in those aerosols that they captured from these aerosol generating procedures came directly from procedural dental unit water. So the sprays of the drill, the sprays of the power scaler, the sprays of the air water syringe, that's 78% of it came from that. And 0% came from aerosolized saliva. So our big fear over aerosol generating procedures, that we were going to aerosolize saliva and we were all going to get COVID, right, wasn't the case with this study. And in fact, one participant had COVID at the time and did not spread any disease. And so really what I think this study shows us, and what I'm excited about, is if you're taking care of your water lines, then the aerosols in your operatory are totally safe. So let's make sure that we're doing that so that we're safe as clinicians. What are we breathing in our operatories? There was a 1988 study that showed that dental professionals have a higher incidence of Legionella antibodies because we're breathing it from our water lines that we're not treating. We know that exposure to contaminated procedural water can lead to the exacerbation of asthma. I read in an article, I have nothing to back it up. I could not find any research behind it, but it said that the number one reason why dental professionals miss work is because of upper respiratory infections. So is that from our water? If we're not treating it, are we breathing bad air? And then they redid that Legionella study because it kind of got debunked for a minute and now it's back. And it really found that dental professionals are really at a high risk of Legionella from their dental unit water. But after this, or if you're already taking care of your water, you are not at risk at all because you know that you have safe water. So if it's not enough to take care of our patients, it's not enough to take care of ourselves, There's an entire alphabet of organizations that say we have to do this. So the CDC, OSHA, ADA, ADHA, OSAP, EPA, AWWA, the American Water Works Association, and the ISO all say we need to take care of our water. So this is a cool map I like. You can find your state wherever you live. And it will show you that light blue color is where people are required by the CDC or required under some sort of written law to test your dental unit water. The ones that are kind of that medium blue, that indeterminate. So it's not exactly spelled out, but you'll notice that both California and Georgia are in that kind of sort of indeterminate. And that's where those 2 cases are with contaminated water. And it's not going to be an argument to say, well, the CDC didn't say I had to, or it's not written into law. It's certainly written into law that we have to provide a safe dental visit and we have to follow the instructions for the use per our equipment. And we'll get to that in a minute. So make sure that you have a plan in place. So what do we do? Let's figure that out. So typically when I give this lecture, we talk about shock, test, treat, and maintain. We're going to alter it a little bit for you all. And this is where I really would love some group participation. So feel free to throw stuff in the chat. But the first thing that we need to figure out is, where is your water coming from? So is your water coming from a bottle in your operatory, or is your water coming straight plumbed in from the city? So it's coming straight plumbed in from the city. Do you have some sort of centralized water system that is then treating the water in some way? So that could be through, this one has ozone. That could be through some sort of other mechanism that we'll talk about in a minute, but that gives some sort of antimicrobial through filters within your water. If you're using a bottle system, there's some pros and cons to bottles. I'm a big fan of bottles. I think you get a little bit more control over them, which is what I really love. Pretty low upfront cost. When I joined my my office in Virginia Beach here, they actually had just retrofitted all the chairs with bottles. They were old chairs, and it only cost about $100 a chair. I understand that it's gotten more expensive since then, so that's been about 4 years. But it does provide you the ability, if you have a water bottle, to fill that bottle with the water that you choose. So if that's ozone water, you can choose to put that in your bottle. If your office if your area ever has a boil emergency and you have a bottle, it's not coming plumbed in, you can still work, which is great. Oh, I like this. So both Gemma says she uses a centralized UV system. Okay. And then Christina says we use water bottles filled with ozone. Awesome, Christina. Okay, great. Good to know. When you use a bottle, you do have a lot more choices about what kind of antimicrobial you want to use. And that might be ozone. And you have more control over your water. Okay. And Karen's using ozone as well. Great. Some of the cons to the bottle is, it's one more thing to do, right? And in dentistry, one more thing sometimes gets looked over. I do hate it when my water runs out in the middle of a procedure. That is kind of a pain in the tuchus. And there is a small chance of recontamination when you're taking your bottles on and off, but I think we're smart enough to avoid that. So we have some traditional source water, which, how funny that my slide did not show up. That's really weird. Because it's a click slide. Sorry, guys. So we certainly have water from the tap. We have distilled water. We have distillers. So some of you might have a distiller. And then we have spring water. So some people put into their water bottles any of these kind of source waters. Now, what I just saw Christina and Karen mention is ozone. So there's certainly different companies out there. And then Corinne says, I would like to use ozone in my water bottle. Could someone mind teaching me how to do this? Yes, Corinne, we're going to talk about that right now. So depending on how you get your ozone, do you boil it? Do you have, how are you making your ozone? Or do you have a machine, that's hooked to your wall and you can simply just fill? So I got to have some conversations with some different ozone water companies, because again, this is sort of new to me. So I had a great call 2 weeks ago with the folks from BioShore, which they have a unit here, which you can put in your lab or somewhere, and you can fill your water bottles directly from that. And that makes ozone water directly from there. Or I know that many of you have these bubblers, right? So Longevity, I understand they just went out of business, which is kind of a bummer. And then we have the Puro 3. I just lost their name, right? I think that's their name. But so depending on how you're doing it, but yes, absolutely. You can make water. You can come in the morning. The majority of people I've spoken with, Barbara Tritz, they come in the morning, somebody turns on the ozone, they get the ozone rolling, and then they start to fill all of their bottles. Promo Life. Thank you, Fran. Wow. Why did that bump out of my head? I chatted with them on Thursday. They were super nice. So you fill your bottle that way. Now, the thing to remember when it comes to ozone, there's a couple, and you guys know this probably way more than me, but this is kind of the deep dive I've been doing trying to learn about it. The big thing with your ozone is all ozone is not created equal. And I went on to Amazon and ended up 1,000 places to Sunday and found, wow, look, you can buy this ozone thing for like $20. Not so much. It's kind of like some of the dental things we see out there, right? That you can buy that not so good. Like I can buy a power scaler, right? It's not going to do anything. Frankly, it's going to do some harm. So it's important that we understand the ppm of our ozone. What is that? Christina says hers is 10 parts per million. Christina, if I could give you a high five, I would totally give you a high five right now. So I'm so happy about that because we want it probably in a perfect world, you start off with your ozone at 10 ppm. So there's different ways to test your ppm, your parts per million of your ozone. There's test strips, just kind of like how we test pH, kind of the same thing. There's titration drops, and then there's digital meters. The digital meters probably are, that's where we get the most expensive, but all are great ways to be able to get an idea of where is my ozone. And the reason that that's important is you guys know about the half-life of our ozone, right? So I know this slide has way too many numbers on it, and I really apologize, but maybe I found it fascinating because I'm new at this, but it was really talking about when you get up, you get in the office in the morning and you are starting to create your ozone. It's important to understand how much water you're using and then how long you are titrating that so that you are getting the proper ppms. So, and then kind of what flow rate you're doing. So there's a sweet spot for you somewhere. And if anybody wants this information, I'm happy to send it to you. This all came from Promo Life. They sent me all of this to help me understand. So if you're starting off with 1,000 milliliters, and you're going to go in like 10 to 20 increments, this lets you can really see where you get in your parts per million. And then if we decide that we want to go up to 2,000 milliliters, we need to fill a lot of bottles, right? I mean, how many operatories do you have, right? So 2,000 milliliters, you're going to end up now having to go at least 20 to 30 minutes to be able to get, we're talking about up to like 7.2 ppm. So it's very important that you are making sure that you have those proper parts per million so it'll continue to be active throughout your day. And how old is your ozone, right? So you can't like walk in the morning and be like, yeah, oh, we got some left over from last night. It'll be good, right? We know that ozone doesn't work that way. It has that 20 to 30 minute half-life. And so you can see here, if you started out with ozone, I lost it. 58 degree Fahrenheit. So your temperature of your water matters too, right? So if it's summertime and it's super hot in your office, your ozone isn't going to last as long, right? And so these are all things to consider when you're thinking about that product that you're putting into your bottles. So look at that. You can compare them. There's at 77, so it's summertime, right? You can see that half-life, it really decreases a lot faster. So you want to make sure that your ozone is doing what it's supposed to do for many reasons, right? Not just your water lines, for your patients. So I liked this final slide. This is the final little numbers I'll make you look at, and then we'll talk more. But when you look at that half-life of ozone, you can see all the different temps, right? So if it's a super hot day, it's a 95-degree day, your air conditioner's on the fritz, your half-life now, you're at 8 minutes. Your ozone isn't working nearly as quick or long as you'd like it to. So make sure that if you are filling your bottles with ozone, that you indeed are getting what you think you're getting. And one thing to remember is the nose doesn't always know when it comes to ozone, right? We know that ozone has a great, kind of a clean smell. My husband said it smelled like airplanes when he's like, it smells like the inside of an airplane. I was like, oh, well, maybe they use ozone. But this is actually my dog, by the way. This is Yellow. You might hear her squeaky toy outside my office right now. But the nose doesn't always know. So just because you smell your ozone water and you're like, oh, no, it still smells, it must be still active. That is not the case. It still could have a really low part per million, much lower than we want. Ideally, the lowest that we would want it to be is at 1 part per million. That's about when we're hitting that point of it's not going to actually kill things anymore. It's not going to be able to destroy that cell wall when we're hitting 1 part per million. So 10 is going to get us there for a while. We might actually be able to get to lunch, then refill, and then go again. Now, there are some questions though, and I've talked to a lot of friends that are using ozone, that it really might be enough if you're not using the ozone to treat, if you don't want the ozone for the benefit of your patient, you just want it for the infection control, you might be fine to be using it once a day in your lines, like flushing it through. That might be enough to then really just keep that biofilm at bay so it doesn't. So we're going to be using it more like a treatment product or a shock product. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So shocking. So traditional dental unit water treatment is we typically start with shocking. So you want to shock before you change products. So let's say at the end of this today, you're like, I've been using, Liquid Ultra, and now I really think that I want to try to use ozone. Go ahead and you can actually use ozone as a shock. Go ahead and run that through your lines and do a really good flush of your lines. And that's going to get out any residual of whatever treatment you might have been using. So if you've been using a tablet or a straw or whatever, we want to make sure that we clean that out. It's sort of like if you decide to change your chair disinfectant, you want to wash with soap and water in between because everything leaves behind a residue. So we're going to shock then. You probably will have to shock periodically. However, again, if we're talking ozone might just be your shock. It might do the job because it just has so many amazing properties. And then you definitely want to do a shock. If you do a test and you get a test that shows you have about 200 colony forming units, I want you to go ahead and do a shock. And the reason that is I know you're like, Amanda, you said it was 500 colony forming units. The reason is that 200 colony forming units are pretty tricky. And by the end of the day, they could be up to 400 colony forming units. And by the next day, they could be 800 and then 1600. And biofilm, it is a beast and it grows really fast. And so if you're starting to get some growth in your test, go ahead and do a shock. And so we'll talk a little bit now about how we actually do that shock, right? There are many products on the market. Liquid Ultra and ICX Renew are your 2 strongest shocks. Somebody mentioned bleach. Yes, Corinne mentioned bleach. That's another good effective shock. Hypochlorous tablets, that's become one of my favorite shocks, actually. Sometimes people have issues with bleach, and hypochlorous is a nice fast shock. So I just get the tablets and I crush them and then I dilute them. So these are all effective shocks, and ozone can be an effective shock. But when we shock, the important thing to do is read the instructions for use. Now with ozone, we don't have that. So let's talk about how we shock. So the first thing to remember, like I said, is first read the instructions, right? If you have to dilute the product, sometimes some of them you're going to dilute. You're going to, mix 2 products together, or you're going to put some in and add some water, whatever the instructions say. With ozone, you would just make sure you're using good part per million ozone, right? You want it nice and strong. So put that into your dental unit water bottle, reattach that bottle, and then run every single line in your operatory. So your air water syringe, your assistant air water syringe, your power scaler, your air polisher, your high-speed handpiece, anything that gets water, you need to run that shock into, and then let it sit. So depending on the instructions for use, if you've chosen like bleach is a 10-minute sit. Don't let it sit any longer than 10 minutes because it could start to get corrosive. So 10-minute shock. Hypochlorous is a 30-minute shock. Liquid Ultra and ICS are an overnight shock. If you're doing an overnight product, make sure that you put a sign in the operatory that says shock in progress in case you're sick. And then somebody comes in and uses your room and then they spray shock product into somebody's mouth. We don't want that. So you're going to take off your water bottle and dump the residual into the sink, if that's what it says, or it might tell you to run the rest through. If it's ozone, I would run the rest through, run it, all the lines, just really push it through. Ozone actually kills stuff so fast. Like it has like a 30-second good part per million ozone. If you were using a 10 part per million ozone, it's going to kill everything in like 30 seconds. So really, if you just flushed an entire bottle of ozone water through your line, through every single line, that's your shock. That should do it. And then you can, if you're using a regular shock product, I always like to fill it up with warm water and then just do like a nice flush just to clear out the lines. So no patients are like, it tastes funny, right? You don't want to get any of that stuff in somebody's mouth. Again, if you're using ozone, that's one of the beauties of ozone. It has like the patients will be like, oh, the water tastes funny. It's sort of like, have you guys ever cleaned your coffee pot with vinegar and like the next 4 coffee pots taste like vinegar, right? It's really hard to get that out. So again, there's an advantage to ozone. If you're using bleach for a shock, please don't put any bleach in your suction lines. The bleach will go to your amalgam separator if you have one, and that will do really bad things with the mercury, which isn't good for anybody. So make sure you never put bleach in your suction lines. And if you are using a treatment straw, which I don't think any of you are, you don't want to shock through a treatment straw. You want to make sure that you put in a dummy straw or a fake uptake straw. But I don't think we have to worry about that so much because we don't have anybody using a straw. But this is what I'm talking about. So if you're using one of these for treatment, iodine or silver straw, take that off before you run your shock through, because they don't play well together. This wouldn't play well. You don't want to use one of these treatment straws with ozone. They wouldn't play well together either. So make sure that we're not mixing products because chemistry can happen. This is the most important piece that I want you all to remember. I know I said that 409 days might be the most important, maybe 2 things. Testing. No matter what you are doing to take care of your water, whether you are using your grandma's secret pickle juice recipe and you've decided that that has antimicrobial properties, you have to test your water. You have to test to show that what you're doing is working. OSAP recommends that you test monthly until you pass for 2 consecutive months, and then you go to quarterly. So every 90 days, you test your water. You can do that in office or you can do that mail in. My practice, we love to do 1 mail-in a year, and then the other 3 we do in-office testing. That way we have a third-party verification. So collecting your sample when you're testing is super easy. You can do pooled sampling now, which is great. When I started my Waterline journey, I had to get like 5 tests per operatory, and my poor dentist was like, Amanda, this is costing a lot of money. I was like, I know, but it's safe water. Now you can do 1 test per operatory. So you just take that testing vial and you try to put in equal amounts from your air water syringe tip, from your power scaler, from your air polisher, from your handpiece, whatever takes water. Put in a little bit. And then and you know, if they pass, they all passed, you're good. If they failed, you're going to shock everything anyway. Typically, then if they fail, I personally like to then test each line individually because I want to know who the culprit was. I mean, I got to find who to blame, right? But that's up to you. You can continue to do pooled sampling. Studies show that pooled sampling tends to be very accurate. You can see here when you do it individually, it was 83%. In pooled sampling, it was 81%. So really pretty good. And it's a huge cost saving. So in-office testing, like I said, in-office testing is really nice because it's confidential. When I started my Waterline journey and I went to my office after I learned we're supposed to be testing water, and I said to my doc, hey, are we testing water? Yolanda, I'm actually at the end of this webinar. This is exciting, Yolanda. You guys are all going to get a free test. You guys are going to get a link to get a free test just for listening to me yammer on. So yeah, I'll tell you at the end. So when we started my Waterline journey, I will tell you, I knew we would fail. And so I totally wanted to do in-office testing so that I could fail privately, because who wants to fail in public, right? So it's really nice. You do get a very imprecise colony forming unit count. You kind of have to guess. It's more economical though. And since OSAP requires that higher testing frequency, it's really a convenient way. And you get your results between 2 and 7 days. So here you go, Yolanda. Here's a few companies that make in-office tests. So ProEdge makes the Quick Pass. You can see that right here. MyCheck. This is a red paddled one. So the Quick Pass, you get your results in 2 to 3 days. You read them 48 to 72 hours afterwards. The same with the MyCheck. You read that one 48 to 72 hours. And then HPTC has one, and you read that one 5 to 7 days afterwards. So you can see here how you can see what grows on there. You can see all these little red dots, right? So the red dots are what grows on the ProEdge one, and then the red paddled ones, they kind of it's kind of a mucusy color. You can see one right there. So I like the red dots. They're a little easier for me to read, but So mail-in testing, I mentioned we do mail-in testing once a year. The nice thing about mail-in testing is third-party verification. If somebody ever came in and said, hey, are you testing your water? You'd be like, yes, look, a whole company said we are good to go. Post that for your patients. Let them see that too. You get very precise results, which is really nice. It does involve overnight shipping, so it costs more money than that in-office test, which is why we do it once a year, not every time. You do get a report emailed back to you, and you can get those results depending on which one you pick between 1 and 7 days. So if you're having a fail cycle, that 1-day turnaround is the bomb, because then you know you're safe. So there's a few different mail-in tests out there. ProEdge has one. Loma Linda University, they have a great water lab there. Agenix also has a mail-in test lab, and they all use an R2A, like they grow it on an auger plate, if you remember that back from college. There's a new way to test water, which I'm super excited about, and it's called flow cytometry. And it actually uses lasers and fluorescence, and it actually can detect the cell size and whether it has nucleic acid, whether it's alive or dead, like, because we know like the presence of dead biofilm means there's a lot of food for live biofilm. So anyway, really gets into like that really super nerdy nitty gritty, which is really fun to be able to look at. And so both ProEdge has the flow kit, which is flow cytometry, and Stericyl now has the rapid check. And those, like I said, are available. Actually, you get your results in 20 minutes, but you have to mail it. So it's 24 hours later. So you get it pretty fast though. Sometimes it's even less than 24 hours, depending on the FedEx cycle. But it's really awesome. And I have a fascinating little kind of ask of you guys. So I spoke to my friends at ProEdge trying to ask them, because they get all, of course, tons of water tests. And I was like, how's ozone doing as a water treatment source? And they said they don't have a ton of data, but they think it's doing pretty well. It's probably in the 70% passing rate. We sort of guessed that maybe sometimes people might be using ozone. They think they're using great ozone and it doesn't have enough parts per million. You know, it's kind of like ran out of its juice or something like that. But they said specifically, if there's anybody here on this call that wants to help us do a little bit of science, they will give away free flow test kits to test water so they can understand a little bit more about ozone and water. So at the end of this, I will give my email. And if you want to do some flow tests, kind of maybe a before and then shock with ozone and then do another test, it would be super fun. I'd love to see the science. I just want to learn more. I'm kind of just a chronic learner. Chronic? I don't think that's the right word. But anyway, so what if you fail? You've done this, right? You're using like the best ozone ever, or you've done a bleach shock and you fail. I highly recommend the triple shock. And the reason I like the triple shock is the way I think biofilm works is I think we have our protective layer of biofilm, we have our virulent layer of biofilm, and we have our dead layer of biofilm. They're kind of layered on top of each other like a cake, right? So if you get that first shock, you get off that protective layer. Then that second shock gets to that virulent layer. And then that third shock gets to kind of that dead. So you could do that with like super fresh ozone, or you could do that with bleach, like go 1, 2, 3, and really make sure you knock it out. Check for dead legs. Often in our operatories, you might have a line that you just don't use anymore, right? Like, we used to use that one, but we never hook it up anymore. Well, that could very well be the source of your fail, because the bacteria is just, it's having a biofilm party in there because the water never flows. It never cycles. And so, so check that. If it is a line that you know you're never going to use, call in your tech and have them cap it. So that way the water doesn't hang there and just make biofilm and cause trouble. The next thing is to test your source water. And I mentioned, what's the parts per million of your ozone, or what is your tap water like? Or are you using a distiller and that's where you're getting water? Sometimes those distillers will fail because they have the same tiny tubing, and often you have them in central sterile next to the autoclave because you're making that water for your autoclave, and it's nice and warm and steamy, and that's biofilms growing in that. So test your source water if you're in a fail, or check your filters. That was my big problem the first time I started with water. Was my Cavitron had this little UFO filter on it, and it actually looked like that. It looked black. And apparently you're supposed to change that thing every couple of months. And I did not read the instructions for use, and I never changed it. And so that was the reason for my fail. So check if you have filters. You might have a hidden filter in your junction box right there. You might need your tech to help you with that, but there could be a filter there as well, and that could be causing you to fail. And then also air water syringe tips. When you are taking your sample, you don't want to be doing it through an air water syringe tip or really through your handpiece. And that sometimes these metal air water syringe tips actually aren't getting sterilized in all those little channels and tubing. So you might want to consider disposable. I'm sorry, Earth, I apologize. They do make compostable ones now though. But make sure that those metal ones, that could be causing you to fail. So test it without that metal tip. So I want to tell you a little bit about like I'm a true failure stories, right? I've been lecturing on Waterlines. This is like now since 2020, so 2 years in, and here is my co-hygienist Karen's operatory. I go to do my waterline testing, and Karen failed up a storm. Look at that. This is Karen's air polisher, and this is Karen's ultrasonic, and both of them had lots of growth. And so I shocked. And look, she passed. There's still some dots there, right? It wasn't completely clean. So we did a shock, and I went back through and did everything individually. And what I figured out was it was her air water syringe. We use the EMS airflow, and that water heater. Our patients love the water heater, but so does Biofilm. Ooh, Biofilm loves a water heater. So this one, we had to come up with a whole different system to be able to make sure that we were treating that so that that water heater didn't beat us up. So I continued to do another shock. I did a bleach shock. She continued to fail. She was in that fail cycle. I didn't take my own advice, and I didn't do the triple shock. I just kept doing one. That's why I learned the triple shock was the way to go. Then I switched over to hypochlorous because I said change shock products, right? Still getting some growth. So this was a month later. And then I went ahead. She failed again 3 weeks later. So I went ahead and did 4 hypochlorous tablets. I did a huge shock, and we got her into that pass cycle. So once I did that triple hypochlorous shock, we finally got her so that she was passing all the time. So that was exciting. And now the room hasn't failed since, which is great. Now, my dentist room then failed, which was kind of a bummer, but now he's on a pass cycle too. So I tell you, Biofilm is a beast. It kind of beats you up. So we talk about shocking and testing and then treating. So treating is kind of like when we talk about traditional water care, I always like to say shocking is like our periodontal maintenance visit. It's when you get in there with the, the airflow, you're doing that subgingival air polishing, you're getting in there with your piezo. I mean, you're using lasers, you're doing all the things, right? You getting it. That's shocking to me. Now, treating is kind of like home care. Like I would never say, hey, patient, I am so darn good at what I did in our periodontal maintenance visit that you don't even need to brush or floss or water pick or use your perio protect trays or anything for 3 months. I'll see you in 3 months. No, that's not going to work. So you can't just do this ozone shock and then not worry about it again. You got to continue some kind of thing every day in your water that's going to keep that biofilm at bay. We have to make sure that we don't let it grow back because biofilm's a beast. So we mentioned those centralized water system. There's a lot out there on the market. And so if you don't have the bottles, you can do something that that treats the water as it comes to your chair. I will tell you though, these have these pass less frequently. They have a higher fail rate. That's the word I was looking for. So they tend to pass about 60% of the time. One of the issues with using a centralized system is that you sort of lose some of the control over treating your water. So now if something goes wrong and you have one of these systems, you have to call your tech in to deal with it, which I don't know, sometimes it's really nicer to be able to have that, your control. So one of the things that you can use is a tablet. They have those silver or there's silver tablets that you can drop in and you can dilute those and there are a bunch of different companies make them. We have ADEC has ICS, Blue Tab, we have Citrasil, Patterson has their line. They also have straws. I showed you that picture of that straw. So they have silver and iodine straws, depending on the brand. I will tell you, if you're using a straw, many well-meaning sales reps came in and told everybody, oh, you just put this straw on, you don't have to do anything for a year. It is not a get out of jail free card. Biofilm can still grow. You still need to test. So testing quarterly is very important. So Crosstex, Hufridi, Sterisil, and ProEdge all make a straw. And I mentioned if you're using a straw, make sure to use a dummy straw. There are also liquids that you can use as treatments. They vary greatly in their instructions for use, so make sure you follow the instructions for use. The dilution, some use every day, some you use over the weekend, some you use for 3 weeks in a row. It's very confusing. make sure you follow the rules. But there's a bunch of different companies that make liquids. But you guys can actually use ozone as a daily treatment as well. So you can use it as your shock, like make sure you get that really good part per million ozone, that like you're shocking it, you're making sure that you have blasted out. And then daily, putting ozone in your bottle, if it's good quality ozone, really should be just sort of your everyday antimicrobial, because we know it has that antimicrobial effect. It's going to destroy cells. It's going to remove that electron from the viruses. So we're going to be able to use that as a treatment product too. It's kind of a 2-in-1. It's kind of awesome that way. So we need to make sure that then we maintain our lines, right? So you want to appoint a Waterline Warrior in your office. I mean, empower somebody to be just as excited about water as I am. I don't know if anybody exists like that, but maybe. And make sure that you have a good standard operating procedure. So whatever you decide to do, whatever products you decide to do, and whatever testing cycle you decide to do, make sure that's written down so everyone understands it, and that you write down what you've done. Taking pictures of those paddles. I'm a big fan of taking the pictures of the paddles. They actually will hold up in court. I actually do have some precedent around that. And so take pictures, but we all know that it's documenting, right? If you don't document it, it didn't actually happen. So Gemma says, how about baking soda and hydrogen peroxide on a daily basis? Gemma, I would say I haven't ever tried it. But if you want to try it and then keep and test, that's the cool thing. That's kind of what I love about Waterlines is you get to know whether it works or not, right? Like, I mean, I make the joke about grandma's pickle juice, but who knows? Maybe the vinegar from her pickle juice is going to do a good job. But it could do a good job cleaning out lines. The big thing with, I would make sure that you were flushing after the peroxide. The peroxide, I wonder what it would do to the gaskets. So that becomes an issue. I mean, we really want to make sure that whatever we're doing, that's the big thing about the bleach. I said, don't leave bleach more than 10 minutes. I don't know about the peroxide, whether that would affect your gasket. So I certainly, if you did that kind of as like a daily shock, maybe that would work. But if you're already using ozone, I actually think that that's probably going to be your best bet without any harm to your equipment. So flushing versus purging, there's a little debate in the Waterline community about this, but the big thing that we know for sure, in the morning, you flush your lines. Some studies say 2 minutes, some studies say 8 minutes, some studies say between 20 and 30 seconds, but flush them at least for 30 seconds. And flush every line in between patients. We know retraction happens. That stuff comes back. We want to make sure we're not sharing it with the next patient. So flush everything. There's a little debate around purging at the end of the day. So depending on what kind of product you're using, if you're using a tablet or a straw, you might actually not want to purge, meaning, you know how you turn off your unit and you push all the air and water out? You try to get it as dry as you can get it. If you're using a product, now they're saying don't do that anymore. Now actually leave that product in your lines. Now with ozone, we know that ozone would be dead by the morning, right? Its half-life is gone. So if you're using ozone, purging your lines at the end of the day is probably a good idea. So turn off your unit, the air and water out. You're never going to get it dry, but it might do a good job for being able to get some of that water out. Yolanda says, how do you get the ozone into the lines? So if your water source is plumbed, Yolanda, the only way that you can get your ozone in the lines, this is a little different, is they do make, and I can slide back to it. Hang on, let me find it. They do, I talked to BioSure. Here, look at that. Here we go. BioSure has these two products here that do, this is one goes in your chair. And this actually makes ozone into your chair. And this one goes into just the whole office system. So they have two different systems for putting ozone into your practice. And then, yeah, I think those are the only two right now that I found. If anybody knows of another one, please absolutely tell me. Elise wants to know about backflow. Yeah, that's a whole nother lecture on suction, Elise, but I do not make out with your suction, even though people love doing it. We have good solid evidence that shows at least 1 in 5 people get backflow when they suck down on their suction. I would love, in a perfect world, I would love for everyone to run suction cleaner in between every single patient. I know that we don't have time for all this stuff. I mean, again, that's a perfect world. I am a big fan of backflow preventers. So they make lots of different backflow preventers out there. And I think that that's a really good idea because that's gross. So some myths that I always hear around water. Some people say we use distilled water, so we don't have to do anything. That is not true. No matter what you're using, you have to test. Distilled water actually doesn't have chlorine in it, so it actually promotes more biofilm growth. So that's not your savior. And then a little bit like Yolanda just said, the city water comes straight in our unit, so we don't have to worry about this. You still have to test. And more than likely, if you have no way to treat your water, you will fail your waterline test. It's just how biofilm works in those teeny tiny tubings. So you need to figure out a system, whether you put in a whole office system or whether you retrofit to bottles so that you have the control. One thing to mention, we won't really sit on this for very long, is sterile water. If you are doing any kind of procedures, pulpotomies, things like that, you need to be using sterile water through sterile tubing. So it doesn't mean that you buy sterile water and you pour it into your water bottle and then you deliver it, because it just became unsterile the moment it entered your dental unit water lines, because those aren't sterile. So you have to be using either disposable or autoclavable water tubing when we're doing sterile procedures, or use some kind of syringe or things like that. We want to make sure that we are not cross-contaminating. I don't know the rules about ozone water there. So I'm sure one of you could school me on that up a storm. You can see here the menu manufacturers have updated their instructions for use, which is exciting because it kind of gives a little push to definite you have to test your water regardless of what your state mandates. So you can see here, ADEX says you should test monthly, then quarterly. Pelton Crane says monthly. Midmark says monthly, then adjust. Belmont says monthly, then quarterly. DCI says monthly. So depending on your chair manufacturer, they are now saying, hey, you have to test your water. So it was kind of fun to get them on board. That's pretty recent. So I always get this at the end. Somebody's like, do I really have to test? Yes, you have to test. The CDC, OSHA, OSAP, ADA, FDA, ADH, everybody said you have to test. Nearly 1/3 of treated water lines, 1/3 of lines where people are doing what they think they're supposed to be doing, they still fail to meet standards. They're still higher than 500 colony forming units. Non-treated lines, if you're not doing anything, tend to have 200 to 400 times greater the CDC recommendations. And then 61% of practices that test, like my office, still fail. So we're doing all the things and we still fail. You fail sometimes. That's why you got to test, because you got to know to do something. And it's the only way, only way to know if your protocol is working. I mean, no matter what, if you are trying baking soda and peroxide, it's the only way to know if it's going to work is by testing. The more you test, the more often you pass, which I think is super exciting. So the first time you go to test, only 60% of offices tend to pass. Then we go up to 70, then we go up to 89. Then we have a sophomore slump. We go down to 83, but then by the 5th test, once you're testing pretty regularly, you tend to pass pretty often. But don't get complacent, because I showed you that I failed. So what do I have to do again? You got to shock, you got to test and write it down. You got to choose a maintenance product. So even if you're doing ozone, that's great. Make sure that you're using good ozone. Flush your lines at the beginning of the day and in between every patient. Retest quarterly and write it down, and then come back through and shock as needed. So if you get in that fail cycle again, make sure you use some really good ozone to get there. This is my personal waterline protocol. Like I mentioned, we're not using ozone in my practice, so I don't have that to play with yet. However, I did just get a little squirt bottle, which I cleaned my house with yesterday, and I liked it. So this is what we're doing at my office. You're welcome to like screenshot it if you want to. I did mention that my airflow gave us trouble, so we had to come up with a liquid to put in it. I'd be curious if you guys are just using ozone. If you have EMS units, is ozone keeping up in those EMS units with that water heater? I'd be fascinated to know that, because that one's kind of a beast, but I'm never giving away my EMS unit. So, I made it work. These are my references. If anybody wants to go back and read some of the studies that I referred to, they're here, but here is my email. If anybody wants to email me, just amanda@amandahillrdh.com. And then I promised you all a free gift. So here is the free gift. So you can use this QR code, or you can go to proedgedental.com/Amanda-Hill, and ProEdge will send you a free quick pass just for listening today. So you can see if your water lines will pass the test. And honestly, if anybody wants to help me learn about ozone and how well it works in water lines, I would love to send you free flow kits. And frankly, I'd like to give a couple offices too. So I'd like to do a pre-test, and then you do a shock with ozone, and then we do a post-test. So we can really see how well it does. Like, is it really getting out those lines and getting clean? Oh, cool. Karen says she's game. Thank you, Karen. Don't you love just a little science? Like, it's like, I hated science projects when I was a kid, but now, man, like if I could do science projects, I'd do them every day. Oh, awesome. So do you have any questions? I'm sorry. I know we're at 8:01. I apologize. I got all excited about the ozone stuff. Oh, I think you're muted, Fran.
Yes, I am. I am blown away. More information than you think you know, but you don't know what you don't know.
And the more you know, you realize the less you know.
Holy mackerel. So yeah, I need to have a conversation with a couple of people I know.
Yeah.
To make sure that they're doing all this testing. I wanted to mention, I'm going to ask Dawn to unmute herself.
Yeah.
Because
I did.
Okay.
Well, the first thing I wanted to say was, okay, Amanda, you're amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And I feel like when I get all worked up, and you're very passionate about what you do. And I love when speakers do that. We will be having an ozone course with Tobias and Promo Life. So I want to invite you to come as our guest when we do that.
Oh, yeah. I just met Tobias this week. He's the nicest guy ever. And I learned so much from him, and I would love to come. Oh, thank you.
Oh, yes. So Fran, put that on our list, because
absolutely,
if I say it, I want to hold true to it.
Absolutely. And I was going to ask Dr. Dawn, because we have a few people on the meeting today, and I know there's going to be a lot looking at it afterwards, but Amanda, you were saying about you're looking for some offices. Do you want us to reach out? Like, how many offices are you looking?
It looks like Corinne and Karen both said that they do it. So if you guys would email me, I'm just going to type my email in the chat here. I think that would be super awesome. I mean, I don't want to bug a ton of you, but gosh, if just 2 of you would do it. I would really just love to get some really good hard, data with that fluorescence. Because that just gives us so much more data on, like, is it really getting through all the layers of biofilm? How does it look pre? How does it look post? So I think that would be super awesome.
Yeah, Dr. Haymaker, she's going to be.
Oh, yes, awesome.
So my question was, how many people would ProEdge be interested in? Because we could reach out to members that are using ozone, and if they would want to participate. But
I probably should ask ProEdge first before we put it out there, and then ProEdge is like, Amanda,
exactly. That's why I'm asking, because getting the data, it would be amazing. But yeah, do you want to do it incrementally or?
Okay, yeah. I will ask, and I'll let you know. But even if we got even if we've got Corinne and we've got Karen, Dr. Haymaker, that would be fantastic. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you guys being willing to help me learn too. I got to tell you though, I'm pretty excited about ozone.
I'm telling you,
you can't go back.
Yeah, once you can't. Even if never mind the biofilm in the Waterlines and using it for oral biofilm.
Yeah,
I mean, it just knocks it all out, because when we went to school, it was all about the calculus.
That's all we know.
Now we know it's not about the calculus; it's about the biofilm.
Mm-hmm.
And using ozone, and you have the you're using the oh my God, I lost that word. You're using the flow.
Yes. The airflow, yeah.
Between using the airflow and using ozone water and ozone gas, oh my gosh, that patient is going to heal like you've never seen before. So the combination of everything is just fantastic. So
I love it.
I love all this information. I just wanted to see. Oh, she can't. Gemma,
oh darn, yeah. If we can't do flow if you're not in the US. I didn't mention that because it's a FedEx overnight, the water. But we, maybe we can figure out a way to get you a quick pass, Gemma, because testing water is fun.
Exactly.
I tested on airplanes. I tested in coffee pots at the hotel. Like, I'm a little crazy. I kind of test water everywhere.
We don't realize how important that is. And if you think about how many, really, are they really cleaning those things? Oh, no, not at all. And, it's crazy, but, Is there anybody who have any concerns, questions? I know we're running a little over, but
Yep, sorry,
you know,
guys.
everybody's still here. You know, now's the time you can unmute yourselves. Don't be shy. And then if you
Not-
haven't put your, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Good night. Not a question, but just a big thank you for your presentation tonight. I learned a lot, and here in Barbados, I'll try to do what I can to spread the word. Thank you.
Awesome. If you ever want to fly me to Barbados, I would happily come and see your lecture. And Fran will help
Something to
carry
consider.
my bags.
I will
Something to
carry your
consider.
bags for sure. That's wonderful. Corinne, you have a comment?
I don't know why my eyes are glowing. And
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, you look a little
Very
scary.
interesting, Corinne.
I think I'm just gonna.
It's a little freaky.
Oh my
Um,
goodness. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm just not sure because I'm in Canada. I didn't realize that you had
Oh,
to.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Oh, Corinne, that's a great question. I need to check with ProEdge. I'm not sure whether flows can go over with FedEx or not.
Okay.
I'll check.
Okay.
go
I'll
ahead and
email
shoot-
you.
Yeah, send me an email and we'll figure it out.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. And anybody who's on the call today, make sure your name is in the chat. If you're a current member of the IABDM, you get your CE, your pay CE for today. So if your name is not in the chat, make sure you put it in there so we can make sure you get your credits. And Amanda, I want to thank you so much. And it looks like I was a little psychedelic there for a
I
moment.
know we're having all kinds of cool things happening.
Flashing,
Yeah.
my camera's flashing. But I want to thank you tremendously. I mean, I am blown away by the information, and I'm not surprised that you knocked it out of the park, but more information than I even anticipated. So I want to thank you tremendously. And Dr. Dawn, do you have any final comments?
No, I thought it was a fantastic presentation, and I think it's one that if I had a comment, it would be this needs to be another module in the certification.
I have to agree with you.
I'm all for it. Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
Spread the word about water.
Yeah, I mean, even just using this and putting it in and then writing some questions about it, I think it's really valuable information, and I don't see any reason why the entire staff shouldn't learn about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I really think that if we could corral her to do a module, we're just going to end up with an 18 module course.
That's
There
it.
you go.
Thank you
Wonderful.
so much.
Wonderful. And for those who joined late, I know the time change kind of messed up a lot of people, but you're going to be able to see the recording once it's been processed. So Dr. Noah and I forget who else just popped on. You'll be able to see the
Herminia.
recordings. Okay, so you'll be able to see it later on. So I want to wish everybody a great night. And Amanda, thank you. Mwah. You're amazing.
you.
And I'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
Sounds
All right.
great.
All right. Good night,
Bye.
everybody.